And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Wicked Connected. Today, we are scaling connections, the Fractional CTO's Playbook. And we welcome Gregory Klein-Hertzel, who is the owner and CEO of ConnectivTech. So we'll get a little bit into what he does for a living. But first, we want to hear Greg talk a little bit about a networking event he went to recently. What event was it, and why did you enjoy it?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and good seeing everybody. Thought would be cool is that actually run my own networking group. I had found that a lot of networking groups, I just didn't like how they were run, right? Let's do a lot of education. Show me how many referrals you made. There was like maybe 10 minutes dedicated or less dedicated towards recruitment. So I decided to come up with a free virtual networking event. Happens every Tuesday, 8:30 in the morning to 9:30 in the morning. It's called NEBA, N-E-B-A. And it's for people all over the country. We've structured it to maximize our networking circles. I would say besides that, really just one-on-ones is really my greatest networking routine. What about you guys?
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I love that point about one-on-ones. I think it's like we often think about networking as just being the events, right? But the one-on-ones are so important. And so I have been on, I think Taylor and Stephen and Amelia know this. I've been on this kick of trying to get at least 40 one-on-ones each month, which for me is a lot. For Stephen, that's like Tuesday, but
True.
And do you ever find that like the one-on-ones, like the networking groups are great. Everybody needs them, right? But it's to like get to the people, to then get to the people, to get to the people that you actually want to network with and like add value with. Have you guys found the same thing?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. I think that's the magic of in person though, right? So I'm interested. I'm going to ask you a question in a moment about the virtual networking group that you have. But when you are local, or maybe you're traveling for a conference, you can get that in-person coffee or lunch. I think that goes a long way. Maybe relationship goes a little bit further. Maybe they're more interested in providing more context to you. But the thing about virtual in the world of Teams and Zoom and Google Meet is, you know, I'm in Boston, I can connect to someone in San Diego, California like that and still build really meaningful connections. Yeah. So my question to you, Greg, is with your virtual networking group, do you find that there are a variety of folks around the country, and do you have to cap it off? Because I'm sure you can have more people in, right? If it's not necessarily local, or is it local and it just makes it a little bit more efficient for local folks to join in a busy workday?
It's a great question. We actually started with single seat in just New England. In fact, the title was New England Business Alliance. And we decided to just keep NEBA because then we kept it kept it to be worldwide and not single seat. And what we found was that it's better to not keep single seats in that type of an atmosphere because it's a value add type of networking, right? If you're not, giving referrals or even just networking introductions to anybody is simply a transfer of trust, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I'm going to introduce you to someone via networking or introduce you to my client, you are representing me, right? And so I want to be introducing people or clients to the best people, right? Which means you really got to earn it and make sure that you're doing a good job representing the people around you. And I'm a big believer you're defined by the people you're surrounded by, virtually, employees, friendships, clients, whatever, call them what you will, all people, right? And so it really wasn't until we started opening this up till we started to realize this is a much better way to figure out who we're going to surround ourselves by, and that we're networking group. And almost kind of trickled over to my one-on-ones too.
So it's really interesting. You brought up, as you talk about single seat. I mean, my understanding of the whole single seat idea is like so that we don't, end up stepping on each other's toes with, people who are competing with us. And so I think this is an interesting question. I'm fascinated by your answer to this. So I recently offered to somebody to connect them with somebody who was in a very similar field, right? And they were like, no, I'm good. And so I'm interested in your take. what is your take? Like I have a very specific take on this, but what is your take on meeting people who are in the same field as you?
So I am so excited you just asked me this question. So here's my philosophy. You're going to understand this. So in what we do at ConnectivTech, it's all procurement of vendors. And so what we had found is that if we are assessing, let's just take website development companies, okay, or developers, right? You can put 100 website developers right next to each other. And the fact is, everybody's going to do it different, right? Personality matches with clients, price points, technology, discovery method. So there's almost no competition out there. That's how I view it. Like, even if I was a bookkeeping company, right? The fact is how we interact with our clients and what our price point is and our personalities, everyone's going to be different. So I really think competition validates. It should not be a deterrent, right? So I love meeting with other people in the tech space, or marketing space, or HR space, right? And you'll understand why I say these things in a second. But any similar professions to me, I think it's so valuable, because if we're not partnering, we're dying, right? We all kind of need each other in order to kind of grow. I view that very, very strongly, as you could tell. So, Jeff, you said you had a view on it as well?
No, I tend to agree with you. Like my view is in many ways, there's always a way that, like my brain, whenever I meet people, starts to immediately think, how could I partner with this person? And, the fact is whether I actually partner with them or not is not, doesn't always happen, and probably happens less often than I'd like, and whatever. But the reality is I immediately start thinking of that. And so to me, it's like, hey, how, what, to your point, exactly. Like, well, like, for example, one of, Amelia mentioned that I do marketing. So my brother and I have this marketing company, and and my brother is like a tech guy. He's he does a lot of coding and so forth. And so when we meet other agencies, I immediately go, this is a really interesting opportunity to help them think about how they might, leverage the kind of coding and so forth that my brother does. I recognize that our sort of target, ideal clients are the same, but they could also be benefit from some of the things that we're learning how to do. And so to me, I completely agree with your point. There's always some little point of difference or something that you're doing that they could use or that they could leverage with their clients that they're not able to do. And I think if you have an open mind about it, you will find those things. That's my take.
Oh, go ahead, Amelia.
I was just going to say, it's all about the abundance mindset. If we're all worried about our competition, then you're not, like, there's so many businesses and there's so many people, like, you can't possibly have every single one as a client or a referral partner. So it's really believing, if I'm the best fit, they're going to choose me. And, somebody might do something very similar to me on a piece of paper, but there's different ways we approach things. Just like you said, there's there's a personality where I might hate working with someone and they might hate working with me, and that's okay. And our personalities don't match, but if I recognize that, or maybe someone has a solution that's a little more cost effective, and then that way, when someone comes to me, I'm like, hey, I'm not the right fit for you.
That's right.
This person is. And even still, you're still creating value, even if you're not winning the business.
I will say this, though. I think there is an exception to the rule here. Like my pet peeve when I network, when I ask people, who can I introduce you to? When the people that say anybody, I want to talk to everybody. It's just like a pet peeve of mine. Look, I went through that phase too about networking. I want to talk to everyone. When you start, you kind of have to, right? But the fact is, I can't do a lot with people that like sell makeup, for example. They might be the best at great at what they do. I might know some people that want to buy makeup maybe, but like, is it the best use of my networking one-on-ones? Probably not, right? And so to defining strictly who you want to network with, I think is super crucial, and have specific asks. And I think to be able to start learning about who's the best referral source, right? Who can you add value to the best,
Absolutely.
I think
it goes back into your, the code of ethics, not to cut you off, Stephen, but just to add 2 points there, the code of ethics of, they're representing you. not wanting to just introduce when someone says, I want to meet everyone. Well, are they going to have the same type of level of interaction and impact on the person that you're referring them to, right? So again, representing yourself. And then the last on partnerships, I think the world is partnerships. At the end of the day, you want to impact the client, right? Whether it's service, whether it's a product, whether it's you're just full-blown networking. If you can't help someone out, having a Rolodex of others, even if it's similar to you. Many CPA firms do this, right? You can't afford a certain CPA firm. They have other partnerships they'll refer you over to make sure that you're still happy at the end of the day. So I very much agree with your take, both takes on partnerships. But Stephen, I'll pass it over to you.
Well, I was going to say definitely. I agree. Amelia jumped in, and I was going to say exactly the same thing. Abundance, right? That's what it's all about. There's so many different things, so many different ways, and I 100% espouse that. And I think the other thing is you've heard, or at least I've heard stories of, for example, a couple of fractional CFO type folks, and a couple of them basically combined their lists, and they said, "Hey, we're going to market this together." And they end up getting so much more business by doing it that way because, again, it comes back to the different personalities. It comes back to that. And I think part of it's also just showing that's demonstrating that you're an adult in the room, right? You can work together. You can work with your competition, that sort of thing. Right. So from my perspective, I 100% agree. If I look at myself and I go to some of the different things, it's like, I don't even know what seat I am sometimes, right? Am I corporate gifting? Am I the wine guy? Am I, I don't even know. But I can definitely partner with any of them, kind of put that story however it needs to be. And so I fully agree.
So I want to pick up, sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Go after you.
No, I just was going to pick up on something you said a little bit earlier, which was this comment about going through phases. I think it was a little bit of an offhanded comment, but I actually want to hear your thoughts on this. Is I feel like, these guys know I was not much of a networker until like a little bit over a year ago. And I absolutely feel like I have gone through phases of, becoming more comfortable, maybe being too salesy, whatever it is. And so interested in your take, what are the phases that you see, and what is the advice you give to folks that are starting out
in networking?
Yeah.
So a couple thoughts. One, I think that people forget and don't really realize that networking, I have actually gained some of my best friends in the world through networking. So there's a lot to gain personally through networking. So that's one. Two, someone just beginning, I would really say just talk to as many people as you can. Someone asked me once, how do I add value? Well, you add value by introducing other great people to great people, right? You can't really do that when you first start. You have to be receiving that, but you have to be good at asking, right? And so you kind of go through the phases of the beginning networking groups, the chambers, the BNIs, right? And then you kind of graduate to, more like of focus groups. You're like, oh, I kind of know the people I want to be around. Let me try to hit up H7 or, other types of groups that have more B2B or B2C or like, the fractionals that I love, and then you're like, oh man, my meeting, I'm booked out so far out with one-on-ones. I don't need to network anymore or go to networking groups. You always need to network, right? And go to networking groups. And, I would say in a lot of professions, it kind of works in those phases if you're doing it right. Some businesses can really stick to networking groups and get a ton of business. It just depends on your niche in the SMB space or middle market or enterprise market and what you're trying to achieve there. Did you have a similar thought, Jeff, on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it definitely is. It's an interesting sort of progression, and I like the way you talked about this idea of people when they're starting out. You don't have the network to offer to other people. You have to build it, and so it's been interesting for me that I find more and more, like when I'm talking to somebody, I'm like, oh, I know who I want to introduce this person to, in ways that didn't happen a year ago. And it's like, I think it's really valuable to hear somebody say what who's just starting out, to hear somebody say what you just said, because if not, you're sitting there like, well, I don't think I'm doing this right. Everybody else is giving me all this. Yeah, they've been networking for years. I mean, they've got, and it's like this idea that you suddenly like you start networking and you're going to start creating connections for people when you don't even know anyone is so I think people are pretty understanding that if you're sort of new to this, that they don't expect that you're going to bring anything to the table.
And to add to that, I think what I was told when I first started networking, because I didn't have a network, and I was like, what am I supposed to give? And I was told time. That's the one thing you have. You are just starting out. You're new at your job. You're new in your career. You have time. So show up to people. If they have an event, show up. Go on their LinkedIn, promote their stuff. There's so many little things you can do to give to people that a lot of people don't, because you think, well, I don't have a good client for them, or I don't have I don't know any CPAs, so I can't make any introductions to a CPA for them. It's like, okay, well, now also that gives you an opportunity to say, hey, maybe I could go find a networking group that has a lot of CPAs and invite this person to it. So there's all these small ways you can create value and give back to people, even when you think you don't have the network or the clients or anything like that.
Amelia, you're amazing at that. I want to point that out. Showing up is that little key thing right there. You are probably better at than most people I've met networking, because I see you everywhere. Everybody knows who you are and whatnot. So there is a value in just showing up and just talking to people, Yeah. The other thing I was going to mention with the single seat groups was, it's interesting. And this is one of the core foundations of my business. I discovered that, when single seat networking groups, the reason why they're single seat is because they don't want other financial advisors doing financial planning. They want kind of one, right? But I think that's a problem, right? If you ever made a referral, right, and you're like, oh, talk to these 3 people, I like them, I network with them, they say they do that business, you say you need that, why don't, I'll give you them, but don't hold me to the stake, I'm just gonna give you 3, good luck, right? The fact is, it's really a disservice to the client. One, every client really needs a unique solution. One vendor, one person is not going to be the right fit for every client. So that's the first problem. And 2, if you have a problem with that person in that networking group and it's single seat and you have to refer business to each other, that's going to reflect on you very, very, very poorly, right? And so that's the other thing. And that's when I discovered that there's about a 30% success rate when referring business, just making referrals, right? Unless you're taking time to learn what the client needs, learn what the person you're referring in does, and actually walk them into the client and really say, I trust this person, I've seen them in action, right? So there's a big problem in the referral industry as a whole with that mentality.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I know a big part in the past, right, I've always had to make referrals to accounting firms or evaluation firms, and that's exactly it. They are very, very specific, and some client is absolutely not going to want the Big Four for whatever reason. The next client is going to want something in the next 5 to 10. But I've always liked the ability to make multiple referrals in those cases to say, hey, I can vouch for the person based on my interactions, but you should interview them. You should make sure there's a chemistry, all those sort of other things. Yes. And, you do the rest as far as checking the referrals that make sense for you, or the references of them that make sense to you.
Yeah.
And that's been very well received every time.
Totally.
Now,
totally agree.
Greg, I wanted to switch directions a little here because we didn't even get to chat about what you do with ConnectivTech. You kind of alluded to it, but I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about what you do, how you started the business, and how networking ties into it.
It's amazing. This is actually a perfect segue because one of the foundations is that I found a lot of businesses really failing when it comes to vendor selection, selecting who they're going to pay and who they're going to outsource something to, right? And if you think about it, one of the reasons why is because they're really, really relying on a lot of uncertain methods, right? Quotes, reference checks, RFPs, Google reviews. I'm sure those all sound familiar, right? Yeah. And so a lot of businesses were failing, right? And so ConnectivTech was born. Right. We are a fractional CTO organization, but not in your traditional sense. What we specialize is actually vendor selection and procurement services. So in a way, we kind of found a good way to make referrals, the best way to make referrals, sticky referrals, right? And so a referral basically went from a 30% success rate to over 90% success rate when we're bringing vendors in, right? So what does this mean? So anytime a business needs to outsource something, go through that vendor selection, and get several companies and several quotes, we go out on their behalf, vet organizations, and then bring them as many matches as they want. 2 to 4 is usually the sweet spot. Walk them through the quoting process, help them select and onboard. So really what we are is an outsourced procurement department with a technology consulting lens. And we're helping businesses find cybersecurity companies, tech support, digital marketing firms, HR firms, software development, credit card processing, telephone and internet vendors, right? It's impossible for a business to operate on their own. You have to outsource. And if you're going to, you need to make sure it's a good fit. It's a good match on many levels. And that's what we do. We're a matchmaking concierge service, if you will.
Awesome. And how did networking play, or has it played a role in the foundation of the business and the continuation of it?
Yeah. So that one of a lot of the foundations, let me kind of give you a little history here. I used to work in healthcare administration once upon a time. For 10 years, I was in a national company. It was kind of running all the sales and operations, had sales teams and clinical teams and reporting to me. And I ended up quitting because I called my boss out and committing Medicaid fraud. And he said to me, Greg, everybody's doing it this way. Nobody's ever going to check. We're not going to change, right? And I was like, I leave. I quit, right? Yeah. And I believe that there is an ethical way to do what's right by everyone touching you and still make a lot of money. And so I wanted to create a business structure that was exactly that. And so I started to network. I started to advise clients on what type of vendor was going to come in and solve their problem. Then I would start bringing in some of my trusted partners. Trust is such a big word when you're networking, and undervalued, I think. And you really need to trust the people you're bringing in. And so we started putting our reputation on the line. And one of the biggest things that we do is place MSP companies into businesses, managed service providers. And so we're bringing them, developing cybersecurity programs, talking about tech support and 24/7 help desk, and advising them what to expect when you're actually working with an MSP company. Sometimes we're even brought in to replace vendors and with better ones, right? And maybe they've grown, or they're just trusting. The reality is, there's just more bad than there is good out there, right? How do you identify the bad and find the good? And so now we have a list of over 250 vetted, approved, tested potential vendors, and now 300 to 400 agents now that are also saying, hey, we're partnered with ConnectivTech. They do procurement. We're going to bring them in to help fill this hole that we found that we don't provide, but because we do X, Y, and Z service, That's really how we founded.
I think that your point about trust, and you've mentioned it a number of times, and I'll go back all the way to the beginning of the episode when you actually used a phrase that I've not heard before, but I love. It's that networking is essentially a transfer of trust. And I think that's a really important point, right? I mean, in the end of the day, that's why a referral works. That's why and this is why actually, in my marketing work, we've stopped talking about the marketing funnel. We actually talk about the trust funnel, because when you are talking to small businesses, what you're really trying to do is establish, I exist. I am an expert in my field. I understand the problem. I have, the ability to solve that problem, and you can trust me because you've met me, you know me, whatever. And this is why referrals and connections work for small businesses. And a lot of them go, oh, marketing doesn't work for me. And you're like, well, it doesn't work for you because you're trying to market the way Coca-Cola does. And they've spent 100 years creating, trust, and you just don't have that. Sorry, but I think this point about trust, I think in every aspect of the work that I do, the marketing stuff, the leadership stuff, this issue of trust is the sort of the currency of business in many ways, maybe even more so than money. So I love that point.
Yeah, it is. It's all about building trust, because would you refer to someone who you don't trust?
No.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
And it's a combination of everything we just talked about: virtual one-on-ones, showing up,
Yeah.
pressing the flesh, shaking their hands eventually, right? When you think you got a good relationship, it takes time to build a relationship, right?
Yeah.
To understand someone. Could I trust this person, right?
Right.
Could I introduce them to a client, right? And the ones you can't, if your network's wide enough, then you get them in front of other great people that they might be able to do some business with, or network with.
Absolutely. Well, it's as promised. Our time has flown by. It always flies by. We could talk forever. But we like to, before we close out, we like to have everybody talk about an event, a cool event that you're going to in the next week or so from a networking perspective. So, Greg, we'll let you start us off. That way you don't have to worry about, having somebody steal your event for you.
No worries. In fact, I'm glad you're saying this is a underrated virtual networking event called C-Suite Network. Check it out.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know this group. They meet every Friday. It's just CEOs, C-Suite people all over the country. Friday at 5 p.m. and just to talk about wins and whatnot. And you meet some great people, and it usually turns into some deeper discussions about a lot of stuff. So I definitely recommend checking that group out.
Cool. Awesome.
What a refreshing networking group too. Again,
Yeah.
talking about folks who might be in the same industry, same level, but just wins, what's going on, trends, stuff like that. I want more of that in business. That's nice. I like to hear that.
I'm gonna start asking that question at networking events.
Right.
So what's the win that you've had recently?
I think the positives here. Yeah.
Right.
All right.
I actually had one of those in a networking group before recently, and it was they basically said, hey, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now, and regardless of where you're at, right, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. And he basically said, we're going to take 2 minutes, and it's, what are you grateful for today? And really, it can be business, it can be family, it can be whatever. And that's literally what everybody did. And everybody had a pretty good list. And obviously they're like, okay, this does now set your stage for the rest of your day. Go with that. And it's very true.
So while whoever's going to go next is thinking of their event, Greg, best place to reach you if we want to work with you or connect with you or network with you is?
My email, which is greg.kh@connectivetech.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Oh, yeah, Taylor, you go.
All you.
Go ahead.
All right. So, I'm now officially a co-host of the Third Thursday event. So that's where I'll be on Thursday. I'm excited. I always have such a great time, and it's such a good connection and a group of curated people. So I always have fun. So I'll be there on Thursday. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Taylor, you want to go next?
I'm sure they enjoy themselves even more so than you do because you're incredible and you probably are a phenomenal host. I have actually Jeff DeSocio, who was on last week. He has a networking event in Newton tomorrow. Going to that after work. And then similar to Greg's standpoint on having one-on-ones, this week is a lot of virtual and in-person one-on-ones, which I really enjoy. So that's the bulk of it. Steven, what about you?
Of course, the irony is that I'm in Newton, and I would have loved to have gone to that event, but cannot. So I'm on the Private Directors Association, and we are having a directors table dinner. We have those at the Harvard Club. It's basically members only from the group. And so there's 14 of us to talk about pressing issues and really, Chatham House rules. So what happens there stays there, or at least is not attributed to the person. And so really kind of trying to help work through different challenges, whatever it might be. And they're really, really fascinating events.
It's a cool group.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, I will close us out then. I also am going to that Newton event. I do live in Newton, so I don't know. I was going to say it'd be ridiculous for me not to, but Stephen, obviously you have a good excuse. So I'm going to that event. There's also a Charles River Chamber event at a restaurant called Olaspana on Wednesday that I'm planning to go to as well. And I am like deep in my February one-on-ones as well. So it's been a lot of networking going on. So Very cool. Well, Greg, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much. And
Pleasure mine.
thanks
Yeah,
for all
thank
your
you so much.
Yes,
Thanks for
thanks,
having
Greg.
me.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, bye everyone.
Take care, everybody.
See ya.